So, morning folks, welcome to the channel. As promised, we are going to continue with the beginners series of just how to get started bass fishing, how to get out there on the coast and catch yourself a few fish if you're just getting started up this year. So yesterday we spoke a bit about lures, kinds of lures you'd need, just how few lures you really need to actually get started. I suppose the question then is like, how do you use those and when do you use them and what have you? Um, and the answer to that is not an easy one. Like I would say, just use them, right? Like there are no hard and fast rules. I would be as likely to throw a surface lure as I would be to throw a hard lure, right? And I've often come on to a spot and say put a surface lure over it, and had no take, whatever, fished it fairly methodically, covered all the nooks and crannies where I thought there might be a fish hanging out. Then I stick up a plastic, had no take. Then I put up a hard lure like one of the ones I was showing you, the feed shallow, a nice shallow runner, or sorry now, this guy here, the DC-12, and bang, fish on, right? And then other nights, it's the other way around, right? So I come and I put on a hard lure and a plastic and nothing, and then up on the surface lure and they hit it. So I think more important than like overthinking the lure situation is actually finding a few fish, right? Because then you're in with a shout, if you know what I mean. So it's about finding ground that actually has bass on it. So what you're looking for is shallow, reefy ground with plenty of tide, lots of nooks and crannies, right? Or if you're surrounded by open beach, then you want to walk that beach at low water and find the structure, find the rips, find the sandbars, and they might, if you look at it on high water, you think, oh, that's just a flat beach. But actually, when you get out there on low water and you start to walk it, you notice, geez, it's 2 foot deeper here than it is over there. I had a couple of guys last week and I was showing them, it's like, look, here's a gutter, and it's clearly a gutter, right? And the fish will hang right on the edges of those banks. So as the tide floods over, you want to be sure you're fishing that, right? So that's what I would say to you. And like, how do you, this mystical watercraft, like, what is watercraft? Watercraft essentially is just putting in the hours. Like, it's just getting out there and catching fish and then going, all right, so in a southwesterly wind in X spot, on this tide, fish show up here when there's reasonable clarity in the water or whatever, you know. It's about knowing where to look, I suppose, as much as anything else, right? Um, but sorry, I lost my train of thought there. Yeah, it's not difficult. Like, there really isn't anything that complex to it, to be honest with you. Like, the guys who do best are the guys who put in the most hours. That's just the truth of it. And any of those guys will tell you that they put in a lot of hours where they catch no fish at all, right? If they're honest about it, right? Some guys won't be honest about it and they'll tell you total bullshit, but the truth is, we've all put in days, 6, 8, 9 hours and not had a touch, right? And that's just fishing, right? But the pleasure is the hunt. It's been out there on the coast and in the fresh air and all the rest of it. But there are certain things about the lures, right? So some lures will be kind of straight retrieve. So I would class the DC-12 as pretty much a straight retrieve lure, right? So you just cast it out and keep the rod tip down and wind it back to you, right? That's it. Now, how you fish it is important, right? So how you approach fishing your mark. So you get to your mark, whatever, and just for argument's sake, you're fishing the mark on high tide, right? So I will fish 180 degrees around me. I won't just fish straight out, right? I'll make casts the whole way around because you never know where there's a fish holding. Now at this point, I'm fishing, say, the Copper Coast so long that, you know, I kind of know where the fish hold, right? So I'm going to marks. I can never say that word specifically. Whatever, you know the word I'm trying to say. It's actually going to a spot and I'll know that's where the fish hold, right? And like from having fished the boat, I can tell you that you can be 20 yards from the fish, and there's a big group of fish, and you're 20 yards from them, and you won't touch them, right? So keep moving, right, and move up and down your mark, right, because you never know, right? Now, like another great example of that is I would have marks in the river, for example, where you'd go and fish, and at the high water you get cut off, and then you've got to wait for the tide to drop down, but you're not waiting for the tide to drop down because there's always good fishing in there on the high water, so you're catching fish, and then literally you can follow those fish. You know, you walk, as you walk down, you fish each reef system on the way home, and the fish are mooching down along the coast, and you're hitting fish the whole way home, right? So keeping moving is a really good piece of advice. Don't stay stuck in one spot, right? And when you do hit your spot, fish all around you. Like you'd be amazed at how many fish you'll take really close in, right? So to do that, you're gonna need, you know, you're gonna need the right kind of kit, right? So you're gonna need something like this guy here, rigged, you know, on an offset hook, probably actually without the weight, to be honest with you, right? So that you can cast it in close and give it a couple of twitches, right? So casting down along the shore, giving it a couple of twitches, you know, so you're doing that 180 out in front of you, right? The very same applies to the poppers, right? So people always ask me, what speed do you fish popper at? And I say, well, I fish it at whatever speed the fish want it at, right? Like some days, fish won't take a slow popper, right? But then you start bang, 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 and next thing, poof, you know, you get a take, right? There have been nights when we've been fishing and I've just drift fished poppers, right? Because that kind of sits down like that, right? So it doesn't sit level in the water. It sits like that with its ass sitting down into the water. And if I've got a nice, say an estuary mouth or something, I'll cast it back up the current, right? So the current is flowing from over here. I'll cast it up there from where the current is flowing and just let it drift along and just very gently twitching it, just getting it to wobble. And I've caught some really nice fish that way, right? Now, the manufacturers will say then that that's not how the lure is intended to be fished, but that's just the manufacturer. Who gives a damn what they say? They're not out in the coast fishing, you are, right? So, and I would say that nighttime and daytime fishing are two very different things, right? At night, fish are way more confident. They're easier to catch. They tend to like, in my opinion, they seem to like baits with less movement, right? So less action as opposed to more action. So I find I fish a lot of needlefish. I fish a lot of these kind of baits, right? You know, you can get some really nice ones, Japanese ones, but you can also get some nice homemade ones, you know, the Evo Bass Lance and stuff, really good stuff. But those are two I really like. That Raid Fantastic, I think, is going to really do the business this year. So those are what we call stick baits, right? And we just flicking them out and very slowly working them back towards you, right? And then at other times I'm quite quickly, right? So we just mix it up is what I'm trying to say to you. Don't get stuck into just doing one thing, right? What else? When it comes to paddle tails, right? You've got a bunch of options, right? You can either fish your paddle tails like so, you know, on a standard jig head, right? And get down and explore the bottom. Like a lot of the time, like if you're not willing to lose lures, don't bass fish. It's that simple, right? And somebody asked me yesterday, actually, had I any trick for releasing lures, right? And I do. So what you do is, if you can imagine that this is the braid in my hand, you pull the braid like that. So I'm holding it tight here, and I got the braid here, and I twang it, right? And what it does is it sends a little down the braid, and sometimes it just loosens the hook. You very quickly wind and up, out she comes, right? The other thing is on the retrieve, if I'm fishing deep and like, you know, obviously, right, when I'm fishing these guys, right, and if I was starting bass fishing, I would definitely get my hands on some of these, right. Um, I'm obviously fishing them hard to the bottom, right, because they're intended to imitate. So that's it in Mutsuguro. I think that's a 3 inch, right, 3/4 of an ounce in Mutsuguro. Dark Sleeper by Megabass. I mean, it's just, they're just cracking little lure, right? Um, so you're fishing it tight to the bottom. So when you feel it kind of bang, just give it a little lift, right? You know, just give it a little lift, get it out of the snag or whatever. And you'll learn over time. I mean, there's no way to teach you how to distinguish the bottom from a fish, right? But you'll know over time. I mean, a fish, when it hits it, sometimes they can be quite subtle, but a lot of the time it's fairly obvious that it's a fish, right? And make sure to strike, right? Be sure and strike. Give them a good slap, right? When they hit it, you hit them back, right? So when you feel the dink dink, you right? And the same with the surface lures. Don't just let them take it because they'll drop it. So when they take it, like that, set the hooks in them, right? Now, the other thing then is fighting fish, right? So how do you fight a fish, right? Because that's going to be like, you know, if you're brand new to the sport, well, what the hell do you do, right? So I could say stay calm, but that is not actually possible, right? Especially if it's your first bass, you're not going to be calm. You're going to be anything but calm, and that's kind of the point, right? Is you don't want to be calm, like it's meant to be exciting, but stay tight in the fish, right? And keep your rod up, stay tight in the fish, and just don't lose your cool, right? Just you know, have your drag set, not too hard, like light enough that he can take some line if he needs to, especially if it's a good fish, right? I mean, it really depends on what type of ground you're fishing. For example, if I'm fishing the open beach, my drag is set quite loose. I just let them run. I don't see any point in stopping them, right? It's set tight enough to set the hooks. And once I set the hooks, I just let them do what they want for the first 10 seconds or 20 seconds or whatever. I let them make their first run. They'll make it, they'll stop, and that's when I start. Okay, you're coming home with me, right? So, but if I'm fishing other ground where it's really snaggy and kelpy and reefy, and if they get 20 yards on me, they're gone. Well, then I'll hammer down on them, right? And I'll tighten the drag down. I'll increase the poundage of my fluorocarbon, right? So I'll be up to 20-pound fluorocarbon. I'll be fishing 18, 20-pound braid or whatever, and I'll know that my gear is up to the task of locking down on a big fish. And just, you know, sometimes it's just luck, like can I stop it before it gets to the kelp or whatever, right? So fighting fish, yeah. So the most dangerous part, the most likely time to lose a fish is when you actually have it close in, right? Particularly if you've got a shore dump, right? So what's a shore dump? It's like that one big wave that just comes up and dumps onto the shore, right? That's what we call it, a shore dump. And then it sucks back, right? And you'd be amazed how powerful that is, right? So if you've got 6 pounds of bass in that pull, in that wash, and you haven't got your drag set right, and you try to hold that fish against it, you're going to lose it. It's just going to ding. Good luck, right? So you've got to use that dump to your advantage, right? So when you get them tight to the shore, kind of hold them, because at that point they're usually bet, right? So once you can get that fish's head up out of the water, you're in charge then, right? If he can't get his head down anymore, you're in charge, and you wait. You wait for the wave to come and push, and then you just walk them backwards, right? You just walk them out. So you let literally let the wave wash the fish up onto the beach, and dunk. There you go. Job is oxo, right? And then you got to get down and get them before the next one comes. And I mean, we've managed to do that in absolutely stinking conditions, right? Huge big waves, and boom, right? Now, but stay safe, right? Because it's not always, you know, don't. I mean, I used to do stuff that I would no longer do, to be honest with you. But anyway, So that's it on fighting fish. Just have your drag set. Try and stay cool. Um, don't let them do it. Don't try and stop them on the first run. Once they've made their first run, generally bass are pretty easy to control. Irish bass don't tend to fight too dirty. Like sometimes they do. In some spots I know they do. They fight really dirty, but most spots they don't. They don't head for the kelp or they don't head for the whatever. They just fight it out on the surface. Um, so just stay tight in the fish is the most important thing, and try and keep your rod up and keep control of them, right? What else? Uh, yeah, no, I mean that's pretty much it. Like there's not loads to it. Like once you start to put in the hours, I think it'll become apparent to you, and you'll start to. I mean, really, the fun of it is actually going and learning yourself. To be honest with you, now going with somebody like myself, right, who does it professionally or whatever, will save you an awful lot of time and an awful lot of money in the long run, right? Because you'll learn stuff in a day that it might take you 6 months or whatever to learn yourself, right? And that's kind of how that's my bread and butter, right? Um, there's also lots of really good YouTube channels. There's lots of guys worth following on Instagram and Facebook, that are really informative. Have a look at some of the ultimate fishing guys in France, look at the stuff they're doing, and just pick stuff up as you go, right? Um, but I would say, like, what you want to do is explore all the water that's in front of you at all of the depths, right? And with a variety of methods, right? Because bass are unpredictable in one way. In one way, they're very predictable. They're creatures of habit, right? They'll show up in the same marks at the same time, year after year, right? But in another way, they're unpredictable in that you never know when they're going to feed. You never know what kind of lure they really want.